We're live!
We're live!
I have the hiccups.
Live! So it was your day off?
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Just hung out with Sandy and Felix. How's your day?
Good. Got a lot of stuff done. Sebastian's room is getting there, and the yard as well. We turned on the sprinkler system, mainly to find all the spigots that we couldn't find because they'd gotten buried. Oh, and of course, there was a spigot at the front of the yard that got utterly destroyed by those asshole plumbers that I've been complaining about, who took us to the cleaners, lied about what was wrong. Yeah, we'll add this to the collection of things they did.
Yeah.
I think it's gone. It's probably buried somewhere in the trench that they dug and then filled in. So,
I hope they all step and come.
Yeah. But hey, that's what we get for not vetting our plumbers. We should have known better. We just were very, very, very stressed that day.
It was a very stressful situation.
It was. Don't make good decisions in stressful situations. Oh well.
That one time back in March when I locked my keys in my car, I found a place that was like $25 service call, and I was like, great. And then she got there and was like, so I charged $99 for vehicle unlock, and I was like, she's here and I need to leave.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it went from a $99 pipe flushing to God, what was the second tier? It was like a $500 ultra pipe flushing, and then they were like, oh, the pipe is crushed, we need to replace an 8-foot chunk of it for $6,000. And at that point it was like 5:00 on Saturday night. We weren't going to get anybody else in the following day. We had 7 people and 3 non-flushing toilets. I had been washing our dishes with a bowl of soapy water. And we were like, okay, fine. And then it turned out the pipe wasn't crushed. After they did the work, they were like, yay! And we were like, and then their financing people did that thing where they went to apply for the loan through a bank and they typed something in wrong. So they took out a loan in Jason's name for a different company. And then they took out one typed in correctly for their company. And Jason had to go into the bank to cancel this credit card line of credit. And it damaged his credit score. So permanently, like there's no way to ask for a mulligan on that.
Well, that sounds like I realize you guys probably aren't going to do this, but that sounds like a great case for small claims court.
I know, right? But I think what we're going to end up doing is just cursing them.
I mean, ¿por qué no los dos?
Yeah, it's yeah. We don't want to have to deal with court.
No, of course not.
Maybe the spigot today will be the thing that pushes Jason over the edge, and he's like, all right, it's on. I'm down, but I like either way.
Well, I wish just desserts upon them.
Yeah. Lots of stepping in gum for them.
Yeah. Shall we read?
Absolutely. And if you'd like to know what company screwed us over so badly, just ask in the comments and I'll tell you so you can avoid them. This is not where we are.
Nope, probably not.
And what are you going to work on today?
I'm going to work on, well, so There are two things. There's a question of whether I should be knitting, which, considering that my thumb is still sore, is probably no. And then there's the question of whether I'm going to knit, which is yes. And I will be working on this lovely cabled sweater situation here.
Oh, is that from the Viking knits?
It's not, no, because Viking Knits is packed and I haven't unpacked my books yet.
Incidentally, I don't know if you've thought of this or if you're already prepared for it, but we've got 10 days until Morgan's 18th birthday. And she doesn't get to have any friends over, and she doesn't get to throw a big party. So if you've got something knitted to fling at us, that would probably be awesome.
I will certainly think about that. I can't promise anything because I don't know that I have anything knitted particularly. But I will consider the matter.
She's also her big ambition right now is to build a tiny house. So if we found like tiny house build books, I'm gonna harangue Jason into getting her some stuff on that theme. He doesn't need haranguing, he just needs reminding. After the kids go to bed, he's like, all right, I'm done working. And then he goes to bed and I'm like, wait, we needed to use his credit card for a thing. Rather not do that when he's not in the room. So, Mary had just gotten back, right?
I don't think Mary had gotten back yet. Let me see where we were. Hang on.
It would be the last straw if we had to go out in the dark to look for him?
No, we were before that. We were at Mr. Butterbur went out with another doubtful look at Strider and shake of his head. His footsteps retreated down the passage.
Well, said Strider, when are you going to open that letter? Frodo looked carefully at the seal before he broke it. It seemed certainly to be Gandalf's. Ooh, I never thought of that. Gandalf has a seal.
It must be like a seal ring, I would think. Huh. You know, I probably could use
belt or something.
I could probably use my ring as a seal. It's pretty like relief-y.
Yeah, absolutely. But it would be like a tiny piece of wax.
Yeah.
Big bat like. Inside, written in the wizard's strong but graceful script, was the following message. The Prancing Pony, Bree, Mid-Year's Day, Shire Year 1418. Dear Frodo, bad news has reached me here. I must go off at once. You had better leave Bag End soon and get out of the Shire before the end of July at latest. I will return as soon as I can, and I will follow you if I find that you are gone. Leave a message for me here if you pass through Bree. You can trust the landlord, Butterbur. You may meet a friend of mine on the road, a man, lean, dark, tall, by some called Strider. He knows our business and will help you. Make for Rivendell. There I hope we may meet again. If I do not come, Elrond will advise you. Yours in haste, Gandalf. P.S. Do not use it again, not for any reason whatever. Do not travel by night. P.P.S. Make sure that it is the real Strider. There are many strange men on the roads. His true name is Aragorn. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king.
You know, it sure would be interesting if we had like ID that was just like a particular poem Like, you go to buy beer, they're like, all right, yeah, let me get your poem. And you're like, on this summer's day. All right, here you go.
PPPS. I hope Butterbur sends this promptly. A worthy man, but his memory is like a lumber room. Things wanted, always buried. If he forgets, I shall roast him. Farewell. And then the rune. That is the rune. That is Gandalf's rune. Ugh.
So Butterbur's gonna be roasted.
Butterbur's gonna be roasted.
Roasted.
And yeah. What would your poem be? I hadn't thought of that. Would you write one or would you choose one that's already been written?
I don't know. I mean, I have a very complicated history with poetry. So I don't know if I'm a person to ask about that.
I've written a few poems. I think I could pick one that would be mine. Anyway, I wrote a really short one once called Words Fail Me. It goes, arthritic syllables hobble about my mental art gallery, making inane observations about form and color and influence and texture while staring myopically at the empty space between paintings.
Uh-huh.
No?
Cool. I told you, poetry, me, not a thing. I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry.
Okay. I don't know what your complicated history with poetry is. We'll have to discuss it over tea someday.
We can do that.
Frodo read the letter to himself and then passed it to Pippin and Sam. Really, old Butterbur has made a mess of things, he said. He deserves roasting. If I had got this at once, we might all have been safe in Rivendell by now. But what can have happened to Gandalf? He writes as if he was going into great danger. He has been doing that for many years, said Strider. Frodo turned and looked at him thoughtfully, wondering about Gandalf's second postscript. Why didn't you tell me that you were Gandalf's friend at once? He asked. It would have saved time.
Yeah, a good question, Frodo.
Thank you. Would it? Would it? Would any of you have believed me till now? Said Strider. I knew nothing of this letter. For all I knew, I had to persuade you to trust me without proofs if I was to help you. In any case, I did not intend to tell you all about myself at once. I had to study you first.
This is relevant information, though, Strider. Like, nobody asked you for your childhood, favorite food. Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
What we said was, are you evil? And you were like, I don't know. What do you think?
If I were evil, I wouldn't tell you.
The Gandalf School of Enigmatic Dickery.
It does waste a lot of time. Oh, I had to study you first and make sure of you. The enemy has set traps for me before now. As soon as I had made up my mind, I was ready to tell you whatever you asked. But by then, of course, you would have distrusted me so thoroughly that it wouldn't have mattered. I'm just riffing.
No, I know, that's just my face of agreement and shame upon him.
Mm-hmm. But I must admit, he added with a queer laugh, that I hoped you would take me for my own sake. A hunted man sometimes wearies of distrust and longs for friendship.
Yeah, well, you picked a terrible time, dude. Cut them a fucking break.
Yes, yes, how to win friends and influence people. Sneak into their room and be like, "Am I your enemy? How would you know?"
Well, but also pick people who are literally running for their lives and be like, "Hey, would you like to trust me for no reason, knowing nothing about me?" It would sure be great for me psychologically if you would do that.
Yeah, and by the way, I've been following you for miles and, like,
Yeah.
listening to your conversations, and so trust me. But there, I believe my looks are against me. No, Strider.
Your behavior is against you. Your looks are probably fine.
They
Just 'cause you're
are. Oh, there's Pippin casting shade. They are. At first sight, at any rate, laughed Pippin with sudden relief after reading Gandalf's letter. My looks are against me. Yeah, you ugly. What handsome is as handsome does, as we say in the Shire. And I dare say we shall all look much the same after lying for days in hedges and ditches. It would take more than a few days, or weeks, or years of wandering in the wild to make you look like Strider, he answered. Because we don't fuck with Strider.
I hate it when he talks about himself in the third person.
I know, right?
Just such a dick move.
And you would die first unless you were made of sterner stuff than you look to be. Pippin subsided, but Sam was not daunted, and he still eyed Strider dubiously. How do we know you are the Strider that Gandalf speaks about? He demanded. You never mentioned Gandalf till this letter came out. You might be a play-acting spy, for all I can see, trying to get us to go with you. You might have done in the real Strider and took his clothes. What have you to say to that? That you are a stout fellow, answered Strider.
Thinking to himself, thank God one of them has some sort of survival instincts.
But I am afraid my only answer to you, Sam Gamgee, is this. If I had killed the real Strider, I could kill you. Way to win trust.
I tell all of my prospective friends how easily I could kill them. It's kind of my thing.
That's how you test their resolve.
That's how I show affection.
And I should have killed you already without so much talk. If I was after the ring, I could have it now. He stood up and seemed suddenly to grow taller. In his eyes gleamed a light, keen and commanding. Throwing back his cloak, he laid his hand on the hilt of a sword that had hung concealed by his side. They did not dare to move. Sam sat wide-mouthed, staring at him dumbly. But I am the real Strider, fortunately. He's a troll! Strider's a troll, he said, looking down at them with his face softened by a sudden smile. I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and if by life or death I can save you, I will. There was a long silence. At last Frodo spoke with hesitation. I believed that you were a friend before the letter came, he said. Or at least I wished to. You have frightened me several times tonight, troll, but never in the way that the servants of the enemy would. Or so I imagine. I think one of his spies would, well, seem fairer and feel fouler, if you understand. I see, laughed Strider. I look foul and feel fair, is that it? All that is gold does not glitter, not all those who wander are lost. Let's take a moment and discuss the fact that I don't like that saying on bumper stickers and t-shirts and book bags because nobody who uses it knows the context.
It's the nerd version of live, laugh, love.
It's that, yeah, but it's and it's a great line. I won't say it's not, but I feel like people should know.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you. I think people, again, it's just like kind of a basic bitch quote.
Yeah, it is. It is, I get it. Did the verses apply to you then? Asked Frodo. I could not make out what they were about. But how did you know that they were in Gandalf's letter if you have never seen it? I did not know, he answered. But I am Aragorn, and those verses go with that name. He drew out his sword, and they saw that the blade was indeed broken a foot below the hilt. Not much use, is it, Sam? Said Strider. Which it's not. How does he use that in the wild?
I think he doesn't. I mean, you wouldn't have
a broken family heirloom around for no reason.
Yes. Aragorn is also a dramatic hoe. But also, like, you wouldn't really have that much use for a sword out in the wild. Like, bow and arrow and knife for hunting,
Yeah.
and you could fight with those. But, like, swords are really for combat with.
You don't kill a deer with a sword.
No, you do not. Like, swords are really for, like, combat with other humanoid creatures. And, you know, if you're Aragorn, you just probably shoot them, so.
He punches them with his mighty kingly fist.
Sure.
Not much use, is it, Sam? Said Strider. But the time is near when it shall be forged anew. Sam said nothing. Well, said Strider, with Sam's permission.
What would Sam have said, though? Like, Sam said nothing. Yeah, because he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. The time is near when it shall be forged anew. Cool,
Okay.
yeah. Good job there. Congrats.
With Sam's permission, we will call that settled. Strider shall be your guide. We shall have a rough road tomorrow. Even if we are allowed to leave Bree unhindered, we can hardly hope now to leave it unnoticed. But I shall try to get lost as soon as possible. I know one or two ways out of Bree land other than the main road. If once we shake off the pursuit, I shall make for Weathertop. Weathertop, said Sam. What's that?
You're going to regret that.
It is a hill just to the north of the road, about halfway from here to Rivendell. It commands a wide view all round, and there we shall have a chance to look about us. Gandalf will make for that point if he follows us. After Weathertop, our journey will become more difficult, and we shall have to choose between various dangers. When did you last see Gandalf? Asked Frodo. Do you know where he is or what he is doing? Strider looked grave. I do not know, he said. I came west with him in the spring. I have often kept watch on the borders of the Shire in the last few years, when he was busy elsewhere. He seldom left it unguarded. We last met on the 1st of May at Sarn Ford down the Brandywine. He told me that his business with you had gone well, and that you would be starting for Rivendell in the last week of September. As I knew he was at your side, I went away on a journey of my own, and that has proved ill, for plainly some news reached him, and I was not at hand to help. I am troubled, for the first time since I have known him. We should have had messages, even if he could not come himself. When I returned many days ago, I heard the ill news. The tidings had gone far and wide that Gandalf was missing, and the horsemen had been seen. It was the elven folk of Gildor that told me this, and later they told me that you had left your home, but there was no news of your leaving Buckland. I have been watching the East Road anxiously. Do you think the Black Riders have anything to do with it? With Gandalf's absence, I mean? Asked Frodo. I do not know of anything else that could have hindered him, except the enemy himself, said Strider. But do not give up hope. Gandalf is greater than you Shire folk know. As a rule, you can only see his jokes and toys. But this business of ours will be his greatest task. Pippin yawned. I love that because you feel like there's going to be like, dun, 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 and Pippin going,
Uh-huh.
I am sorry, he said, but I am dead tired. In spite of all the danger and worry, I must go to bed or sleep where I sit. Where is that silly fellow Mary? It would be the last straw if we had to go out in the dark and look for him. At that moment they heard a door slam, then feet came running along the passage. Mary came in with a rush, followed by Nob. He shut the door hastily and leaned against it. He was out of breath. They stared at him in alarm for a moment before he gasped, I have seen them, Frodo. I have seen them. Black riders. Black riders? Cried Frodo. Where?
What?
Auntie Maeve. Never mind.
I'm like not remembering this scene, and
It's Agnes Gooch, the best performance in that movie. And when Auntie Maeve's like, "You're coming out," she goes, "Where?"
oh yeah. Oh man. Yeah, I love Agnes. I'm your sponge.
How bleak was my puberty!
All right, 1 second. My phone's blowing up. I'm just gonna mute myself while I figure this out.
You do that, I'll keep reading. Here, in the village. I stayed indoors for an hour. Then, as you did not come back, I went out for a stroll. I had come back again and was standing just outside the light of the lamp, looking at the stars. Suddenly I shivered and felt that something horrible was creeping near. There was a sort of deeper shade among the shadows across the road, just beyond the edge of the lamplight. It slid away at once into the dark without a sound. There was no horse. Which way did it go? Asked Strider suddenly and sharply. Mary started, noticing the stranger for the first time. He's twice your size, Mary. Be more observant. Go on, said Frodo. This is a friend of Gandalf's. I will explain later. It seemed to make off up the road eastward, continued Mary. I tried to follow. Of course, it vanished almost at once, but I went round the corner and on as far as the last house on the road. Strider looked at Mary with wonder. You have a stout heart, he said, but it was foolish. I don't know, said Mary. Neither brave nor silly, I think. I could hardly help myself. I seemed to be drawn somehow. Anyway, I went, and suddenly I heard voices by the hedge. One was muttering, and the other was whispering or hissing. I couldn't hear a word that was said. I did not creep any closer because I began to tremble all over. Then I felt terrified, and I turned back and was just going to bolt home when something came behind me, and I fell over. I found him, sir, put in Nob. Mr. Butterbur sent me out with a lantern. I went down to West Gate, and then back up towards Southgate. Just nigh Bill Ferny's house, I thought I could see something in the road. I couldn't swear to it, but it looked to me as if two men was stooping over something, lifting it. I gave a shout, but when I got up to the spot, there were no signs of them, and only Mr. Brandybuck lying by the roadside. He seemed to be asleep. I thought I had fallen into deep water, he says to me when I shook him. Very queer he was, and as soon as I had roused him, he got up and ran back here like a hare. I am afraid that's true, said Mary, though I don't know what I said. I had an ugly dream which I can't remember. I went to pieces. I don't know what came over me. I do, said Strider. The black breath. The riders must have left their horses outside. And passed back through the south gate in secret. They will know all the news now, for they have visited Bill Fernie, and probably that Southerner was a spy as well. Something may happen in the night before we leave, Bree. What will happen? Said Mary. Will they attack the inn? No, I think not, said Strider. They are not all here yet, and in any case, that is not their way. In dark and loneliness they are strongest. They will not openly attack a house where there are lights and many people. Not until they are desperate. Not while all the long leagues of Eriador lie still before us. But their power is in terror, and already some in Bree are in their clutch. They will drive these wretches to some evil work. Fernie and some of the strangers, and maybe the gatekeeper too. They had words with Harry at Westgate on Monday. I was watching them. He was white and shaking when they left him. We seem to have enemies all round, said Frodo. What are we to do? Stay here and do not go to your rooms. They are sure to have found out which those are. The hobbit rooms have windows looking north and close to the ground. We will all remain together and bar this window and the door. But first, Nob and I will fetch your luggage. While Strider was gone, Frodo gave Mary a rapid account of all that had happened since supper. Mary was still reading and pondering Gandalf's letter when Strider and Nob returned. Well, masters, said Nob, I've ruffled up all the clothes and put in a bolster down the middle of each bed. And I made a nice imitation of your head with a brown woolen mat, Mr. Underhill, sir, he added with a grin. Pippin laughed. Very lifelike, he said. But what will happen when they have penetrated the disguise? We shall see, said Strider. Let us hope to hold the fort till morning. Good night to you, said Nob, and went off to take his part in the watch on the doors. Their bags and gear they piled on the parlor floor. They pushed a low chair against the door and shut the window. Peering out, Frodo saw that the night was still clear. The sickle was swinging bright above the shoulders of Bree Hill. That's Big Dipper. He then closed and barred the heavy inside shutters and drew the curtains together. Strider built up the fire and blew out all the candles. The hobbits lay down on their blankets with their feet towards the hearth, but Strider settled himself in the chair against the door. They talked for a little, for Mary still had several questions to ask. Jumped over the moon, chuckled Mary as he rolled himself in his blanket. Very ridiculous of you, Frodo, but I wish I had been there to see. The worthies of Bree will be discussing it 100 years hence. I hope so, said Strider. Then they all fell silent, and one by one the hobbits dropped off to sleep. Chapter 11. A Knife in the Dark. As they prepared for sleep in the inn at Bree, darkness lay on Buckland. A mist strayed in the dells and along the river bank. The house at Crick Hollow stood silent. Fatty Bulger opened the door cautiously and peered out. A feeling of fear had been growing on him all day, and he was unable to rest or go to bed. There was a brooding threat in the breathless night air. As he stared out into the gloom, a black shadow moved under the trees. The gate seemed to open of its own accord and close again without a sound. Terror seized him. He shrank back, and for a moment he stood trembling in the hall. Then he shut and locked the door. The night deepened. There came the soft sound of horses led with stealth along the lane. Outside the gate they stopped, and 3 black figures entered like shades of night creeping across the ground. One went to the door, one to the corner of the house on either side, and there they stood, as still as the shadows of stones while night went slowly on. The house and the quiet trees seemed to be waiting breathlessly. There was a faint stir in the leaves, and a cock crowed far away. The cold hour before dawn was passing. The figure by the door moved. In the dark, without moon or stars, a drawn blade gleamed, as if a chill light had been unsheathed. There was a blow, soft but heavy, and the door shuddered. "Open in the name of Mordor," said a voice, thin and menacing. At a second blow, the door yielded and fell back, with timbers burst and lock broken. The black figures passed swiftly in. At that moment, among the trees nearby, a horn rang out. It rent the night like fire on a hilltop. "Awake! Fear, fire, foes! Awake!" Fatty Bulger had not been idle. As soon as he saw the dark shapes creep from the garden, he knew that he must run for it or perish. And run he did, because he's not a frickin' pretty girl in a horror movie, because we're really proud of him.
Way to go, Fregar.
Right? You didn't run into the attic. Or the basement.
You made way better choices than Frodo has this entire time.
Yeah, you really have. Out of the back door, through the garden, and over the fields. When he reached the nearest house, more than a mile away, he collapsed on the doorstep. "No, no, no," he was crying. "Not me! I haven't got it!" It was some time before anyone could make out what he was babbling about. At last they got the idea that enemies were in Buckland, some strange invasion from the old forest. And then they lost no more time. "Fear, fire, foes!" The Brandybucks were blowing the horn call of Buckland that had not been sounded for 100 years, not since the white wolves came in the fell winter when the Brandywine was frozen over. "Awake! Awake!" Far away answering horns were heard. The alarm was spreading. The black figures fled from the house. One of them let fall a hobbit cloak on the step as he ran. In the lane the noise of hooves broke out, and gathering to a gallop went hammering away into the darkness. All about Crick Hollow there was the sound of horns blowing and voices crying and feet running. But the black riders rode like a gale to the north gate. Let the little people blow. The Sauron would deal with them later. Meanwhile, they had another errand. They knew now that the house was empty, and the ring had gone. They rode down the guards at the gate and vanished from the Shire. In the early night, Frodo woke from deep sleep. What?
Oh, I was just kind of like shaking my head like, at least they rode down the guards, so nobody went back to Fatty and was like, "What were you talking about?"
Right?
Nobody was there.
Yeah, but what is he going to tell them when they're like, "Okay, so what the hell was that?"
If I was him, I would tell him it was an enemy out of the old forest. Like,
there you go. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Let's not confuse people with things they don't understand.
And let's not blow Frodo's cover by telling the whole Shire what's actually going on.
Look, you couldn't blow Frodo's cover any more thoroughly than he already has.
Let the little people blow.
Oh, Jonald. You don't think these phrasings through.
He named a character Fatty Bulger.
Look, when you put it like that.
The man had way too innocent a mind for these times. In the early night, Frodo woke from deep sleep suddenly, as if some sound or presence had disturbed him. He saw that Strider was sitting alert in his chair. His eyes gleamed in the light of the fire, which had been tended and was burning brightly, but he made no sound, no sign or movement. Frodo soon went to sleep again, but his dreams were again troubled with the noise of wind and of galloping hooves. The wind seemed to be curling round the house and shaking it, and far off he heard a horn blowing wildly. He opened his eyes and heard a cock crowing lustily in the inn yard. Strider had drawn the curtains and pushed back the shutters with a clang. The first grey light of dawn was in the room, and a cold air was coming through the open window.
That sounds like such a terrible way to wake up. I hate waking up when it's cold.
Yeah. Yeah, I hate having to get out of bed when it's cold. I like waking up and then rolling over in the warm covers and being like,
yeah.
But yeah, getting up, no. As soon as Strider had roused them all, he led the way to their bedrooms. When they saw them, they were glad that they had taken his advice. The windows had been forced open and were swinging, and the curtains were flapping. The beds were tossed about, and the bolsters slashed and flung upon the floor. The brown mat was torn to pieces. Strider immediately went to fetch the landlord. Poor Mr. Butterbur looked sleepy and frightened. He had hardly closed his eyes all night, so he said, but he had never heard a sound. "Never has such a thing happened in my time," he cried, raising his hands in horror. "Guests unable to sleep in their beds and good bolsters ruined and all. What are we coming to?" "Dark times," said Strider. "But for the present you may be left in peace when you have got rid of us. We will leave at once. Never mind about breakfast. A drink and a bite standing will have to do. We shall be packed in a few minutes." Mr. Butterbur hurried off to see that their ponies were got ready and to fetch them a bite, but very soon he came back in dismay. The ponies had vanished. The stable doors had all been opened in the night, and they were gone, not only Mary's ponies, but every other horse and beast in the place. Frodo was crushed by the news. How could they hope to reach Rivendell on foot, pursued by mounted enemies? They might as well set out for the moon. Strider...
how were you planning to outrace your enemies on their giant war horses on your pony, Frodo?
Yeah. At least we'd have had quadrupeds. You gotta have quadrupeds.
There are many quadrupeds that I would not put in a race against a Black Rider. Wombats, for example.
Touché.
All the ponies are gone. Sorry.
Yeah. Strider sat silent for a while, looking at the hobbits as if he was weighing up their strength and courage. "Ponies would not help us to escape horsemen," he said at last. As if he guessed what Frodo had in mind. "We should not go much slower on foot, not on the roads that I mean to take. I was going to walk in any case. It is the food and stores that trouble me. We cannot count on getting anything to eat between here and Rivendell except what we take with us. And we ought to take plenty to spare, for we may be delayed or forced to go round about, far out of the direct way. How much are you prepared to carry on your backs?" "As much as we must," said Pippin, with a sinking heart, but trying to show that he was tougher than he looked or felt. "I can carry enough for 2, said Sam defiantly. "Can't anything be done, Mr. Butterbur?" asked Frodo. "Can't we get a couple of ponies in the village, or even just one for the baggage? I don't suppose we could hire them, but we might be able to buy them," he added doubtfully, wondering if he could afford it. "I doubt it," said the landlord unhappily. "The 2 or 3 riding ponies that there were in Bree were stabled in my yard, and they're gone. As for other animals, horses or ponies for draft or what-not, there are very few of them in Bree, and they won't be for sale. But I'll do what I can. I'll rout out Bob and send him round as soon as may be." Yes, said Strider reluctantly. You had better do that. I am afraid we shall have to try to get one pony at least. But so ends all hope of starting early and slipping away quickly. We might as well have blown a horn to announce our departure. That was part of their plan, no doubt. There is one crumb of comfort, said Mary. And more than a crumb, I hope. We can have breakfast while we wait, and sit down to it. Let's get hold of Nob. In the end, there was more than 3 hours' delay. Bob came back with the report that no horse or pony was to be got for love or money in the neighborhood, except one. Bill Fernie had one that he might possibly sell. A poor old half-starved creature it is, said Bob, but he won't part with it for less than thrice its worth, seeing how you're placed. Not if I knows Bill Fernie. Bill Fernie, said Frodo. Isn't there some trick? Wouldn't the beast bolt back to him with all our stuff, or help in tracking us or something? I wonder, said Strider. But I cannot imagine any animal running home to him once it got away. I fancy this is only an afterthought of kind Master Fernie's, just a way of increasing his profits from the affair. The chief danger is that the poor beast is probably at death's door. But there does not seem any choice. What does he want for it? Bill Fernie's price was 12 silver pennies, and that was indeed at least 3 times the pony's value in those parts. It proved to be a bony, underfed, and dispirited animal, but it did not look like dying just yet. Mr. Butterbur paid for it himself, and offered Mary another 18 pence as some compensation for the lost animals. He was an honest man, and well off as things were reckoned in Bree, but 30 silver pennies was a sore blow to him, and being cheated by Bill Fernie made it harder to bear. As a matter of fact, he came out on the right side in the end. It turned out later that only one horse had been actually stolen. The others had been driven off or had bolted in terror and were found wandering in different corners of the Breeland. Mary's ponies had escaped altogether, and eventually, having a good deal of sense, they made their way to the downs in search of Fatty Lumpkin. So they came under the care of Tom Bombadil for a while, and were well off. But when news of the events at Bree came to Tom's ears, he sent them to Mr. Butterbur, who thus got 5 good beasts at a very fair price. They had to work harder in Bree, but Bob treated them well. So on the whole, they were lucky. They missed a dark and dangerous journey, but they never came to Rivendell. However, in the meanwhile, for all Mr. Butterbur knew, his money was gone for good, or for bad, and he had other troubles, for there was a great commotion as soon as the remaining guests were astir and heard news of the raid on the inn. The southern travelers had lost several horses and blamed the innkeeper loudly until it became known that one of their own number had also disappeared in the night, none other than Bill Fernie's squint-eyed companion. Suspicion fell on him at once. "If you pick up with a horse thief and bring him to my house," said Butterbur angrily, "you ought to pay for all the damage yourselves and not come shouting at me. Go and ask Fernie where your handsome friend is." But it appeared that he was nobody's friend, and nobody could recollect when he had joined their party.
Okay, look, here's the thing. Common sense when you are traveling in the wilderness is that you should know how many people you have with you and what they look like. And then if a random person appears whom you don't know, you should shun them and run away.
Or you could Chaucer it up and demand to know what their profession is and ask them to tell you a story.
No, you should shun them and run away.
I am the Reeve, and here's my story. Here I am the Knight, and here's my story. I am the Orc. And then we had a story of dismembering things.
An orc's
I
tail.
am the pentameter.
I did actually read a book relatively recently that could be like subtitled An Orc's Tale. The main character was an orc.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what they like her people called themselves, but they were like gray and had tusks and whatever. Yep.
I kind of want to read the Canterbury tales. They were Bree.
I could see it.
It could be a thing. Someone somewhere write it. I read the Wheaton's copy of Canterbury Tales many years ago, and I loved that translation. I loved everything about it. I haven't been able to find it since. Like 100 some odd people have translated Canterbury Tales and had it printed, and none of them are. I keep finding it and being like, "Oh, is this it?" And it's not, and I don't remember the name.
You should text Kit and tell her to ask her dad.
Right? But what if he has 9 copies? I mean, I'm sure he does.
He probably does, but like if you remember anything about it.
All I remember is that the translator's introduction was really snarky, which goes for a few of them, actually. I found a few snarky ones and be like this? But one of them had to do with translating brain pan into hat. That's it.
What? That's not. But
right, and I can't remember if the translator was for it or against it, but I remember them discussing it. I remember that discussion happening in the introduction. So now I look for that little.
I'm going to say they were against it because that's not what brain pan means.
It is not what brain pan means.
Unless you have a tendency of wearing other people's skulls as hats, in which case more power to you. That's very goth.
A line of something by my pan, something man. And apparently somebody translated it to something my hat. What something than that. And yeah, I think either that was the translator was arguing for it, saying this was the best we could do. Hey, Marjorie. Or they were saying, yeah, this is stupid because a brain pan is not a hat.
One of the two.
But that discussion doesn't happen in any other intro. So comment down below if you know which translation I'm desperately seeking for.
Indeed. And it is 8 o'clock. I hear the howling and I have an appointment.
And you have a what?
I have an appointment.
Okay.
So
I love you.
I love you too. I'll see you soon. Bye.